So I get to do a lot of the things that I always really loved to do. And I also get to use my technical background as I do that. So for the last 4 years, they call me a technical instructional designer. And then I also do have my coaching business, which has evolved over the last 4 years. I have a podcast that's been running for 3 years. And then I help women and couples in their relationships. So I'm just such a multi-passionate person really in the it's been almost 17 years. I've done a lot of different things.
Hello, and welcome to the Shift Your Day Job podcast. I'm Brittany Cates, your host and companion on this incredible journey of career transformation. Get ready for inspiring stories, valuable insights, and a roadmap to shift your mindset towards a more fulfilling professional life. In each episode, we explore the remarkable journeys of individuals who made the leap from one career to another. As we navigate through these stories together, you'll find motivation, strategies, and the confidence to pursue your dreams. Whether you're feeling stuck, contemplating a change, or just seeking a dose of inspiration, this podcast is your weekly companion. Tune in every Thursday as we uncover the secrets to shifting your day job. I'm Brittany Cates, and I'm here to guide you on your path to a more fulfilling career. Hello, lovely listeners. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Shift Your Day Job podcast. It is late in the evening as I am finishing up the editing of this episode, and I'm excited to introduce you to Sharon Costanzo. She is a relationship coach, and she has had many different careers in the past almost 20 years, and she's just really impressive because you can tell she is intelligent and driven and multifaceted. And she's going to share with you her career evolution and how she's tried many different things. And really, there's not one thing that defines her. She has so much going for her, so many different talents, so many things that she's interested in, and she's tapped into those things and utilized them along her career journey. So I am looking forward to sharing this conversation with you. Please enjoy Sharon Costanzo. Sharon, thanks for being here on my podcast today. Welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So if you could start off by telling us a little bit about your career journey, like what have you done in the past and where are you now and kind of what got you here currently?
Yeah, this could be a very, very long story. I'll try and cover all of the high points or the most important details without telling my whole life story. But when I was in school, in like middle school and high school, my parents are very educationally oriented. They both have college degrees. Actually, all of my grandparents are college educated, which is pretty unusual for that generation. So education was a huge emphasis in my family. And I grew up LDS. I grew up in the Mormon church where being a stay-at-home mom is kind of the cultural norm. But I knew in my family that having an education that would provide for a career, like a real career, was also really important. So I was kind of in that space of, a lot of my peers were kind of thinking, oh, I'll just go to college for a couple of years and find a husband and be a stay-at-home mom. They weren't raised to be as career focused as I was raised to be. So I was thinking in, junior high and high school, what do I want to do? And I think I was always attracted to the more service-oriented professions, but that was kind of looked down upon in my family. My mom's an accountant and my dad's an engineer. So I kind of felt a lot of pressure to pursue a really practical career. And also, I always did really well in math and science. And so, by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I think I pulled out one of these career sheets and it was biomedical engineering. And I was like, oh, I can do that. That's like helping people. That fills my desire to be of service to people and have a real impact on people's lives, but also maybe fulfill the pressures in my family to do something really impressive and career oriented, practical in that way. So by that time, I had decided, okay, I'm going to become a biomedical engineer. I grew up in Utah, and the University of Utah has a biomedical engineering program. And by the time I got to the end of my junior year, I was kind of feeling like I was done with the high school experience. I graduated early, and I started a really accelerated BSMS program in biomedical engineering. And I ended up changing to mechanical engineering for my master's degree, but I got my master's degree in mechanical engineering when I was 22 years old.
Wow.
And I started work, like, the day after I defended my thesis. I just jumped right into it, and it's so funny now, like, that was in 2007 when people didn't really talk about gap years, you know? I was like, "Oh, how wonderful would that have been to even have taken, like, a month or 2 off to celebrate this huge accomplishment that I had just made and enjoy some traveling or something." But I was just so anxious to start my career. And so I started working. I ended up getting a job at the local gas utility. I studied ergonomics and safety in my master's degree, and I started working at the safety department at the gas utility company here in Utah. And I think I always, even from the very beginning, I had like this little bit of an entrepreneurial bug too. Like, oh, all of the things that I'm doing for this company, if I did it for myself as a consultant, I could make so much more money. So I started thinking that way, but I just kind of kept like just going along, you know. I kind of got into autopilot in a way. I worked in the safety department for about 4 years, and then I ended up transitioning to a different role within the gas company. I worked as a project manager and corrosion engineer. So I started doing more engineering and project management. I really loved the project management engineering work. I was a very good project manager. I was really good at getting things done quickly and doing well there. But there was just a lot of dynamics happening there at work. It was not a very female friendly work environment. I ended up meeting and marrying my husband at work, and being there was just so many dynamics going on. I ended up transitioning to a different role at the gas company to see if that might be better. I'd not be able to have a little bit more distance from my husband at work and all of that. And I ended up working in the corrosion engineering department for a couple of years. I had my first child while I was working in that role, and things just got really difficult and really toxic. And around that time, I was just trying to figure out what to do with that. My husband and I were trying to figure out what to do. And then I found out I was pregnant with my second child, and it was a big surprise. My kids are 17 and a half months apart. And I always say 17 and a half months apart because it's so much more dramatic than saying they're a year and a half apart, right? But it was a surprise to get pregnant so quickly. We were planning on having more than one child, but not so soon. And it just felt like, as stressful as work was, and my son that was, almost 18 months old when my daughter was born, he was having some issues with being able to eat, and I had this new baby, and I ended up giving my notice and quitting my job. And I was a stay-at-home mom for about 15 months. My husband was in grad school at the time too, so he was working full time. He was in grad school, he was gone a ton. I was home with 2 babies, under 2, and I just was not happy not having any sort of work outside of the home. And I was like, "Well, maybe this is my chance to." The money is not such a priority for us right now. It's really just getting me out of the house and feeling more fulfilled. So, what do I really want to do? What was it that I really wanted to do before I let everyone else's influence kind of pressure my decisions? And I decided to start working at a math tutoring center. I love math. I love working with kids. And I also, in college, I actually had thought about changing my degree to be a math teacher, but I went and worked at the high school, and I was like, "Ugh, being in the school environment is just too overwhelming for me." But I ended up running a math tutoring center for about 2.5 years when
Wow.
my kids were little, and it was a part-time job. It was a really fun, really rewarding job. We really saw a lot of impact on these kids. being able to improve their confidence in math. It was just amazing in so many ways. But I started catching that entrepreneurial bug again, like, oh, maybe I could do this for myself and have the real time and financial freedom that I want. And so I started thinking about that. And this was before, I mean, I guess this is always the way it is. You don't know what you don't know, but I decided that coaching would be a great way for me to use all of these skills and interests that I have. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be a coach. You don't have to do anything to become a coach. You just call yourself a
Yeah.
coach. And I was like, okay, I'm going to become a coach. And I took a few online classes on coaching. And then I started talking to the owner and my regional director at the math tutoring center about what are the possibilities. Could I maybe cut my hours back? Could I maybe help in some other way while I try and get this business up off the ground? And the owner of that company did not want me to have any other outside employment than that part-time job that I had. So they actually started looking for my replacement without even talking to me about it, which I was really disappointed by. I felt like I was doing a really good job and I kind of deserved to have that handled differently. But anyways, when I found out they were going to replace me, I just said, you know what, I'll give you my 2 weeks notice. So I gave my notice and then I went into like this deep depression, like,
Mhm.
who am I? What am I worth? What's my next move? I'm not making any money. I'm not doing any good for anyone. And my husband talked me down off of that, you know. But at the same time, I didn't feeling the pressure of starting a business and having it make money right out the gate was just a little overwhelming for me. It wasn't great for my personality of wanting things to be more stable and secure. So I did end up looking for another job and I found the job that I have now, which it's been 4 years. I didn't expect it to take 4 years of working on my business and working my
Yeah.
job, but I work for a medical device manufacturing company, and I do technical training for them. So I get to do a lot of the things that I love to do. I get to work with people in more of the teaching and education part of things rather than just the, like, really technical widget making part of things. So I get to do a lot of the things that I always really loved to do. And I also get to use my technical background as I do that. So for the last 4 years, they call me a technical instructional designer. And then I also do have my coaching business, which has evolved over the last 4 years. I have a podcast that's been running for 3 years. And then I help women and couples in their relationships. So I'm just such a multi-passionate person who's, I mean, really in the it's been almost 17 years. I've done a lot of different things.
That's amazing. It sounds so impressive when you say all the things that you've done and all the knowledge that you have because you have all these different experiences. And I was listening to another podcast yesterday, and the gal on there was saying, like, oftentimes it's looked down upon when people are like moving over here and then learning this over here and then having this job over here. And what's wrong with that? Like, that actually just shows how flexible you are and how much you love to learn and how capable you are of doing so many different things. Like, instead of doing the one career for the rest of your life, you're just a dynamic person. And we're all dynamic, and we don't give ourselves the credit where we have strengths in all these different areas and we can leverage those strengths in so many different ways. So I think that's a really cool example.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think there's so much pressure on people to kind of choose and stick with their choice. And then I think also as a woman, because I've been a career-minded person for so long and I spend so much time in those circles with career-minded women, there is so much pressure to not take a break from your career that they look at it from the financial cost of what happens when you take a career break. And I will say, I'm sure it has cost me financially to do my career the way that I have done it. my husband has a very similar educational background as I do, and he started working later than I did in life, and he makes way more money than I do. And that it kind of pisses me off in a way, but also it's been such a privilege for me to be able to explore so
Yeah.
many different things.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting because I talked to someone else recently who was like, oh, I made this kind of pivot in my career because of my children at the time. It's really impacted where I am now in my career. Right. And if we look at it from the financial standpoint, like you start in a career and if you stick through it like your husband, then by the end of it, this is how much retirement you would have, or this is the benefit you would have from it. And I
Mhm.
mean, that's nice and all, but at the same time, you're doing what's best for your family. You're doing what's best for you. And like you said, it opened up more possibility because you had that break or because you took a, people might take a different turn in their career and it's really okay. It's something I think to be more grateful for than frustrated about in the end. I would hope, like that takes a
Yeah.
lot of like internal work, I would say, to be
Oh,
able to
yeah,
do
for
it in the
sure.
end. But just all the opportunity that you had to be with your kids, to kind of figure out what you love doing. I mean, you found out you loved teaching. I mean, there's a lot of benefit to that versus just having the money at the end.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure, and I think, like I said before, it really is a privilege that I've been able to do that, and I understand that not everybody has that privilege, but also I think a lot of us, we do get caught up in the messages that we hear of what's important, and it takes a lot of courage to take a step back and think about what is it that I really want for my life, and how does my career and how do my professional goals fit into that. And, part of me still wants to like prove that I'm capable of being as like quote unquote successful as any man because I know that that's true. But yeah, it is. There's a lot of internal work that goes into the decisions that we make in our careers.
Yeah. I'm curious when you in high school, you're like biomedical engineering, is that right?
Mhm.
And then you just like went with it. When you started in college in that major, did you feel like aligned with that? Or were you not really thinking about that? You're just like, this is just what you do. I'm
Yeah. Well, I that's a great question. I don't know if I was self-aware enough to really think, "Is this what I want?" I did well enough in my degree. I started out with an academic scholarship, and that required me to keep a really high GPA, like a 3.8 GPA, and I wasn't able to maintain that. So I wasn't like a straight A student in school. I was like an A or B student. So I was fairly average just because all biomedical engineers are super high achievers. A lot of them are pre-med students, so it was very competitive in that way. And I think I did recognize, okay, like I'm not as ambitious and passionate about this as some of my peers are, but I'm also not just scraping by. So maybe this is just how it is. I don't think I really had the self-awareness to really tease that out. I did recognize, I mentioned I started out, it was supposed to be like a BSMS program to get me a master's in biomedical engineering. And by the time I was completing my undergrad level coursework in biomedical engineering, I knew that there wasn't anything in that area that I was interested enough in to pursue graduate level work in that field. And I just happened to find the work in the ergonomics and safety program, and ergonomics especially I was interested in. Once again, like, ergonomics comes back to people on a more personal level, like, how are people working and how does it impact their bodies? So I ended up doing my research in that, but I did also have a crisis when I was in grad school of like, "Oh, do I wanna be a teacher?" And my advisors were like, "You know what? Like, if you finish your degree, you can still be a teacher if you want to be." So I took their advice, and I'm grateful that I did. Actually ended up going and working part-time at the high school during that to get a feel for that, and that's when I knew that teaching in that way was not for me.
Mhm.
So, I was kind of starting to explore things, but also I wasn't at that time, at least I didn't feel like I had the privilege of slowing down to explore that further, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is a pretty common thing to like, you're in school or in a career and you're so busy that you don't really have or take the time to stop and reflect on how
Right.
you're feeling about it, you know? And in my situation, because the pandemic gave us more downtime away from the daily grind, I had the time to really focus on it, even though it had been on my mind. Like, what do I want to do next? What is my next career move? I didn't make the time to figure it out until I was kind of forced to, which was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I hear that from so many people, like, especially my friends who are full-time in their business, which is something that I would love to see happen for me in the future, but it's a lot easier to make those decisions when they're kind of made for you, they
Yeah.
get laid off or something,
Yeah.
and so it takes a lot of courage to make those decisions when they're not forced on you or
Yeah.
made for you.
Yeah. You had quite a few different career changes. So can you pick one that maybe you had some self-doubt at making that career move? And like, what did you
Oh,
do to kind of overcome that and move through that feeling?
that's a great question. I think the one that's definitely created the most self-doubt in me is starting my coaching business and calling myself a coach and feeling, like, really qualified to work in that field. And I think there's 2 things that comes from for me. One of them is kind of my family culture of not really valuing that kind of work, and I think the other part of it is my own, like, imposter syndrome and perfectionism of, like, can I really be as good at this as the people who I consider my mentors in this field? So I'm still working through some of that, but I actually have recently started a new training program within my coaching specialty, and I'm in this practicum right now where I'm meeting with other people who are studying the same thing as me, and we're practicing together, and I'm like, "Look at all of these people that I respect and admire who are feeling just the same way about all of this stuff as I am," because I mean, I help people with their relationships and their marriages, and I can't think of anything that's more important than that, and so I feel just a lot of pressure to get it right, and then I've just realized with all of the work that I've done and all of the people who I've met that we're all in the same place where we're kinda making it up as we go, while also doing the best that we can with the information that we have and the experience that we have.
I love that. I think we hear about or see the highlights of what people are doing and think, oh my gosh, that's so
Yeah.
cool. But at the core, we're all the same. Like we are all human and we all experience similar emotions and we're all winging it in a way, you know? Mm.
Well, yeah, and I think also, like, making the transition for me from, like, a more data-driven role like engineering, like, in engineering, there is a way to find I mean, it's still vague and ambiguous in some ways, but there is a scientific method for figuring out the best way to do things. And the people I work with in that field, that they don't come out and be like, "Ah, I have so much imposter syndrome. I'm not sure if what I'm doing is right." Like, there is none of that when you're sitting in a room talking about these things. But I've transitioned into a field that's not so straightforward.
Mm.
And it is I mean, it is data driven in a way, but the data is much more qualitative rather than quantitative. So that adds a whole other level to all of this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting because you're so used to in your previous job measuring things with quantitative data. And now you have shifted, even with the math tutoring, right? Like it's a lot more subjective and a lot more qualitative. How has that been for you? Like working through using one side of your brain to another and making that
Uh,
kind of change in
I
your focus, maybe?
I do think that, and this is totally just my perspective, I don't have any research that backs this up, but a lot of women who are in technical roles end up doing a really good job of like walking the line between the two, the right and left brain, so to speak. Like one example of this is a lot of female engineers end up going into technical sales and marketing because they can, I think it's because of the way we're socialized or whatever, we've been able to kind of mesh those two worlds in a way that somebody who's kind of just been always on one side for so long hasn't had the experience and practice doing. So I think that even though, I spent the first 9 years of my career at the gas company, I always was still in that like relationship cultivating soft skills, quote unquote soft skills. I remember my second boss in the corrosion engineering department. They sent me to this big leadership development training. It was a 6-month long thing. And we were learning, we were using the Clifton Strengths Finder to kind of develop ourselves as leaders. And my boss was a very old school kind of engineer type. And he just said to me something like, I think that soft skills are overrated. You know, I was like, well, okay, So I think I've always kind of been, even though I've had more technical roles, and I don't even know if technical is the right way of saying it, but that's the best word I have for it. Even though I've worked in more strictly technical environments, I've always brought that relationship building, teaching, influencing part of myself to each of those roles.
I just love that reminder that it's never either or because no matter what we're doing, we're always bringing something of ourselves into it and applying strengths that maybe aren't in the job description necessarily. But
Oh, for sure.
so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting perspective to think about, especially like more and more women in the workforce and going into these roles that, like you mentioned, was very male dominated when you were working there at least, and how things are structured around that and what an adjustment it is to try and have us as females fit into that structure and then hopefully reroute kind of what it looks like to make it more
Yeah.
inclusive because we're bringing our nature of being
Yeah.
relationship building and those soft skills, maybe bringing those in more
Yeah.
than they're used to having them be. I don't know. Just interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Can you discuss a tough moment in your transition and how you stayed resilient?
Yeah, well, I did talk a little bit about, like, when I quit my math tutoring center job and I didn't have anything else lined up. I was just this brand new coach with no clients. I called myself a coach, but I really had no idea what I was doing, and I was just like, I don't wanna exaggerate or make light of depression at all, but I was very depressed for several weeks, like, not wanting to get out of bed. It wasn't like a long-term thing, but I was questioning my identity and questioning my value as a person. I was kind of letting go of some of the identities that maybe my family had created for me, that I, become an engineer and work my whole life like my dad did. And that's a whole nother thing. Like when I talk with women about relationships, I think so many of us, we want to do our lives differently than our moms did. And so I was trying to figure out, I didn't want to go back to being a stay-at-home mom and relying solely on my husband for financial support, but also not having that identity outside of motherhood. So I was depressed by the idea of that being the only choice that I had. I was depressed by the idea of what if I'm never successful in this new career that I've created for myself? There was just so much uncertainty in that position that I was in, and it was just overwhelmingly depressing to me. But I did, I ended up getting a job, and my husband was really kind and supportive. Like, you making money is not the reason why we have a life together. And I've always found that I do have a history of struggling with anxiety and depression. And I've kind of just been going through that in other ways in the last couple of months. But the thing I know about myself is I am resilient and I'm not giving up on myself. And when I'm ready, I will emerge. I'm just getting out of a funk. I've shared this on social media a few times, and now I'm like, "Oh, I'm not, like, forcing myself to be active again. I actually want to be." And so, I guess just knowing that I always snap out of it eventually, and just to keep doing those daily things that you need to do to not keep sinking.
Yeah. I love that reminder of remembering how far you've gotten in your life because of your resilience and recognizing it and acknowledging it and having more compassion for yourself and allowing for that time that you need to move through and feel and deal with those emotions. I think a lot of us have these expectations of like, well, if I just did this and this and this, and I'd be over this and moving forward, and why is this taking so long? And
Right.
we,
Yeah, and I think for those of us who identify as high achievers, which I definitely do, like, we're used to just, like, pushing through everything, and there is no pushing through these low points that we have. It really is the fastest way through it really is to, like, slow down and let yourself feel all of it.
yeah,
It seems counterintuitive, but that's been my experience every single time.
yeah. I've heard this phrase recently, slow down to speed up. And that's
Mhm.
what it makes me think of. Like a lot of times we need that rest, recovery, or just dealing with, stressful emotions. We need that slow down before we're ready
Mhm.
to speed up and progress and keep going. And that's okay. Like that's normal and allowed. And yeah, I think it needs to be
Yeah.
normalized maybe a bit more.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
So you've talked a lot about your husband being a great support system for you. Do you have any other people in your life that have helped through any of these career transitions?
Oh, for sure. I think this is important for the listeners to know. It's not like these people have just shown up at my doorstep. Like, I have really conscientiously cultivated relationships in every phase of life that I've been in. And that's something I really do intentionally. And so, when I'm at work, I'm a really big networker, like looking for, the job that I have now is challenging in certain ways because nobody like just wants to do training for the heck of it. So we really are like marketing and selling and establishing relationships, making sure that we're getting feedback from people so that we're creating resources for people that they actually want and need. So I've been really and I think this is, like, just a natural talent that I have of identifying in every area where we need support, who is gonna be the champion of our work, and really cultivating relationships with those people, and it's not always the manager. We support a lot of engineering and teams of mechanics, and we can always identify okay, who are the people on each of these teams that are really going to be champions for us in our work and support us and give us the feedback that we need. And once something has been out, they're going to tell everyone about it. So I've done that really well in most of the groups that I've worked in and the roles that I've had. And then with my business as well, I was sharing this advice in a female entrepreneur group recently, just how important it is to have a network of people who support you, who know what you do, and also who you can have these real open, honest conversations with. I think so often we feel pressured to just put on a brave face and pretend like everything's fine all the time. And actually, when I was working for the utility company, there were a lot of women who were in my position also who were feeling really frustrated, who were feeling the same feelings of discrimination and all of that. And we would go to lunch together, and we kind of had our times to kind of lean on each other and support each other and figure out how can we advocate for each other at work. So yeah, I've always been able to find people like that, depending on how challenging things were. There were different people, but it is something that you have to consciously cultivate. I've heard and read so many times, especially for women, like we need to find mentors and advocates. And that is absolutely true. I think often we don't talk about just how much effort and consistency it takes on our part to establish those relationships. And it really does have to be like mutually supportive and beneficial. We can't just expect that these people who are senior or considered mentors to us just owe us their
Yeah.
support without us creating some sort of a reciprocation with them.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any advice or tips on like strategies people can use to find those relationships or cultivate those kinds of relationships?
That's a great question. I mean, I think being consistent is really helpful. I think that it's gonna take time. I think sometimes and I hear, like, as adults, we do this too, like, "Why is it so hard to make friends as an adult?" And it's like, well, when we're a kid, just constantly developing those relationships and not taking every single no as a no, not ever. My daughter will ask the next door neighbor to play, and maybe 4 out of 10 times she says no, but she doesn't quit asking her to play. And I think as adults, we take rejection so much more personally. And often it's not really rejection. It's just everyone has a really busy and full life. So be resilient. Don't take those rejections personally. Do be genuinely interested in others. And this is something that I think I do well and people really enjoy and appreciate is I ask them about their lives, not just about their work.
Yeah.
You know, people love I still work mostly with men, but they love talking about their kids. Like they love talking of their kids especially, but people love talking about their kids. They love talking about their interests. You don't just have to ask them about work. And if you can get them to open up about what's going on in their lives and you can remember that, just makes a huge difference. And it can be, I mean, even with the very technical people who I work with, that still opens up. How are your kids doing? Didn't your son just turn 1 or whatever? That breaks down a lot of barriers.
Yeah. I love that advice. Thank you. So, when it comes to your mindset around making a career change, do you have any advice or resources for our listeners that could help them with working on their mindset so that they feel more open to the
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is just to kind of embrace the uncertainty of it all. Like there's no way to be certain that really anything's going to work out. I think so often we try and plan everything out. We've been definitely conditioned to do that. You get the degree, you start the job, and I hear this a lot when I'm in like Facebook communities and stuff where people are are focused on their careers is like, what is the right way to do this? And I had a business coach from a couple of years ago, and she had this great phrase that I think is so applicable here. And she said, clarity comes with action. If you let go and take action, the next move becomes much more clear. If you stand still and you try and think your way through it, you'll never make that move and you'll be stuck for a long time.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes as well. So, yeah. Something that has stuck with me and something that I've definitely been like working on because I think a lot and I have a hard time making decisions. Like, I have a reputation for being indecisive. And so that's something that in recent years I've held onto that quote and really tried to
Mhm.
implement more in my life. So thank you for sharing that. So, as we close, do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about your coaching business, what you offer, and then where they can find you?
Yeah, of course. So my coaching business is called Respected and Connected. And that's what my website is respectedandconnected.com. And I really work with mostly women and then also couples on finding that balance between speaking up for our needs and working through conflict and also prioritizing and cherishing the relationship. So I work with a lot of couples who are frustrated because they're kind of stuck in either talking about their issues or not talking about things and then resenting each other, kind of getting past that hurdle of being able to work through some of those challenges. I have a podcast that's called Respected and Connected also that's on all the platforms and people love listening to it because it's just really practical advice for working through challenges in our relationships. If that area that I work in with relationships is of interest to you at all, I do offer free consult calls and you can book those on my website. And then I also have an Instagram account where I share little things pretty regularly. And that's respected_and_connected on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know that it's definitely a much needed, relationships are everything, right? And so I love that you help couples work through those issues because things come up and we can't always do it all by ourselves. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Sharon, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation and you are very eloquent and you're a professional podcaster. So I think you have a lot of practice, but I really
Oh,
appreciate it and your time and what you've contributed. So thank you.
well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I want to thank Sharon for being on the podcast today. Her story's so impressive. I think she's so talented. I forgot to even mention in the beginning of the episode that she also has a podcast. And I hope that your takeaway from this episode is that you are allowed to be good at multiple things, to enjoy multiple things, to try different careers throughout your life. There's no one right way to do it when society thinks you need to stay in a career and stick with it the rest of your life. That's really, in all reality, not how human beings work. We are multifaceted beings and we are allowed to tap into our different talents in many different ways. And I hope you walk away from this episode recognizing what a normal thing it is to explore and try different career paths. If you felt empowered by this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and share this episode with a friend. The more reviews we get, the more reach the podcast has. In addition to your review, sharing the podcast with somebody that you think would benefit from it also helps our reach. If you are finding value in these episodes, but you need a little bit more guidance and accountability on your career journey, I do offer one-on-one coaching. If you're interested in learning more, please reach out to me. My email and Instagram handle is in the show notes. I would love to chat with you and see how we can work towards shifting your day job. Again, thank you for being here and listening. Your support means the world to me. I hope you tune in again next week for another amazing story from an inspiring career changer. I'm Brittany Cates, and together, let's keep making those career moves.